Hello everyone. Today I am here to talk about the American Revolutionary War and the Declaration of Independence. I spent a great day researching this subject, but I only come up with few things to say because we all know long speeches are very boring. So only included the information filled with lot of interesting examples so you won't get bored. Decades following the Revolutionary War and the Declaration of Independence, America continued to face challenges in their young country. Tension with the British as well as Native Americans led to more struggles for America. The British failed to recognize the United States of America as a separate and free country, and by enlisting the help of frustrated Native Americans, they continued to be a soul within America. They believed they had right to some part of land in western Florida. They joined forces with Native Americans when Americans decided to move westward. And worst of all, they continued to impress Americans onto British ships because of problems with trade. Now let's talk about 7 major causes that led American Revolutionary War. The first major causes is the French and Indian War. Two European nations, France and Great Britain, were fighting over who got custody and control of North America. The colonists and some Native Americans from Iroquois Confederacy were allied with the British against the French and other Native Americans from the Algonquin and Huron tribes. The Sugar Act, making colonists purchase British made goods instead of products from the French West Indians, was Great Britain's first plan to regain lost monies. Great Britain passed the Sugar Act, which included a tax on all non-British imports to strongly encourage colonies to buy British. This act was also an attempt to regulate American smuggling. The act called for tax of 3 pence on every gallon of molasses, taxed wine and other goods, and provided for strict enforcement. Boston Massacre. It's hard to believe, but a snowball fight led to the very first casualties of the war. It took place in the center of Boston 5 years before the first actual battle. Americans were throwing snowballs at British sentries, and one British soldier fell on ice, causing his rifle to discharge. This accidental firing led to the historical Boston Massacre, in which 5 colonists were killed. Crispus Attucks was the person of color casualty of the Revolutionary War. Parliament cancelled the township duties, all except for tea tax shortly after. Boston Tea Party. Tea along with beer was the favorite drink in colonies. When the British undersold smuggled tea, thus threatening American trade, the Son of Liberty, an organization of colonists ready for revolution against Great Britain's king, had a tea party at Boston Harbor. The group disguised themselves as Mohawk Indians, crept in onto Dartmouth, the Eleanor, and the Beaver, and dumped 342 crates of tea into the Boston Harbor water. Mixed reaction met the event, and some colonists, including Brent Franklin, thought that tea should be paid for. Many colonists promised to change their drinking habits to something other than British tea, but that moment was short lived. Okay, now let's talk about the Declaration of Independence and of it. Although the Declaration of Independence was passed in 1776, what followed that passing was grim for the Americans. Immediately after the Declaration of Independence was passed, a British fleet arrived in New York City with soldiers hired by German rulers. The Battle of Trenton was fought in Trenton, New Jersey on the Delaware River. It was a battle between the British troops and Hastings against the Americans. Washington had no choice but to organize his own troops. Washington and his men paraded onto Trenton with blood traces following them in the snow. Colonel Rall, which was the commander of the Hessians, had direct orders to build defense throughout the towns, but decided to go against the orders. Rall was given information about the imminent American attack the prior night at dinner, but he did not respond. Those missteps had led to his death and American victory. In the year to follow, 1777, it was critical one with many developments. General John Burgoyne concocted a plan to conquer the Americans. A British army led by General Burgoyne began to move from Canada to Saratoga, New York. The bands of American soldiers were completely warned of the act that of Burgoyne and his being there. Because of this information, the Americans were ready and out in record numbers. When the two battles of Saratoga were finally fought, Burgoyne's troops were outnumbered by Americans by almost 2 to 1. There was a treaty put into place that said that Burgoyne's troops would be taken as prisoners in Boston, allowed to be returned to England under the condition that they never fight in North America again. Burgoyne gave up the rest of his men, and that was a turning point for the war. Saratoga's victory played a key role with the Treaty of Alliance with France. Victory was finally won in Yorktown, Virginia in 1781. The end of the fighting seemed near when, for the American colonies, when Cornwallis signed orders to surrender his British army to both Americans and French forces. Outside the tobacco port of the town of Yorktown in Virginia, Washington thought he had a small time period to corner Cornwallis in Virginia, so he had Rochambeau moved from New York and headed to south fast. When an officer from British Army finally surfaced, he surfaced with white flag on the stockade that was surrounding them in Yorktown. When this happened, quiet fell upon the land with all of the American and French guns falling silent. As the battle ended, the British drum played, the world turned upside down, which meant that the colonies no longer belonged to the British, but to the Americas. Prime Minister Lord North resigned his position after Yorktown victory. The successor Prime Minister thought that France and America should make peace and the war should end. 17 October 1781 was the official date that British laid down their arms at Yorktown. The Treaty of Paris was signed in 1783 and was contract put into place to end the Revolutionary War. So, although the Revolutionary War and the Declaration of Independence help us to live in a free country without a worry, many lives were sacrificed to earn that freedom. As an honor to the fallen soldiers and the many other sacrifices that earn this right to live freely in this great country, please let us continue their path and make this country even greater. Thank you for listening to this presentation, and I hope you understand everything I talked about. Have a nice day.